The sound of my own front door slamming shut behind me still echoes in my ears as I write this from a dingy motel room that smells like stale cigarettes and defeat. 3 hours ago, I was Daniel Keller, respected senior accountant at Morrison & Associates, loving husband and proud owner of a beautiful colonial home on Maple Street. Now I'm a man without a home, accused of crimes I never committed, watching my life crumble through the thin curtains of room 237 at the Sunset Motor Lodge. The red and blue lights are still burned into my retinas, flashing across Melissa's tear-streaked face as she pointed at me with a trembling finger and whispered those devastating words, "He did this to me." My name is Daniel Matthew Keller, and until tonight, I thought I knew exactly who I was. 42 years old, 15 years with Morrison & Associates, working my way up from junior accountant to senior partner track. Numbers don't lie. That's what I always told my clients. They're clean, honest, reliable. Unlike people, as I'm learning. I met Melissa Sarah Chen 7 years ago at a charity gala downtown. She was volunteering at the silent auction, her dark hair catching the light as she laughed at something her friend had whispered. When she smiled at me across that crowded ballroom, I felt something I'd never experienced before, like the world had suddenly clicked into focus. She was 28 then, working as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit, passionate about animal rescue and environmental causes. Everything about her seemed genuine, warm, real. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. The wedding was perfect, small ceremony in her parents' backyard, surrounded by sunflowers and fairy lights. Melissa had insisted on writing our own vows, and when she promised to stand by me through every storm, to be my shelter when the world grows cold, I believed every word. Hell, I felt every word. The first 5 years of our marriage were everything I'd dreamed of. We bought the house on Maple Street, a 1920s colonial with original hardwood floors and a wraparound porch where we'd sit every evening with our golden retriever, Max. Melissa would curl up against me, her head on my shoulder, planning our future. We talked about children, about the renovations we'd make to the guest room, about growing old together in that house. I worked long hours during tax season, but Melissa never complained. She'd pack me lunches with little notes tucked inside, surprise me at the office with dinner when I was pulling late nights. When I made senior accountant 3 years ago, she threw a surprise party and gave a speech about how proud she was to be married to the most dedicated, honest man she'd ever known. Our relationship wasn't perfect, whose is, but it was solid, built on trust, mutual respect, shared dreams. When Melissa switched jobs last year to work as an events coordinator at Hartwell Marketing, I supported her completely. When she started staying late for client events, I picked up the slack at home, walking Max, handling the grocery shopping, taking care of the little domestic details she used to manage. I trusted her implicitly. The thought of betrayal never even crossed my mind. Why would it? We were partners, teammates, best friends who happened to be married. When she said she loved me, I believed her. When she promised we'd face everything together, I built my entire world around that promise. Max was the final piece of our little family. We adopted him as a puppy from the rescue where Melissa used to volunteer. Watching her with that golden ball of fur, seeing how gentle and caring she was, only reinforced everything I believed about the woman I'd married. She'd sing to him, take him on long walks through the neighborhood, post endless photos of his antics on social media with captions about how much she loved her boys. I thought we were happy. I thought we were solid. I thought I knew her. Looking back now, the signs were there. Subtle at first, like hairline cracks in a foundation that you don't notice until the whole structure starts to shift. It started about 6 months ago with her phone. Melissa had always been casual about it, leaving it on the counter, asking me to check her messages when she was in the shower, never protective or secretive. But gradually, that changed. She started taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom, started sleeping with it under her pillow instead of on the nightstand. When I'd jokingly reach for it to show her a funny meme or photo, she'd snatch it away with a quick laugh and some excuse about work confidentiality. Then came the schedule changes, late meetings that stretched until 9 or 10 at night, weekend team-building exercises that I was never invited to meet or greet beforehand. When I'd ask about her day, her answers became vague, distracted. "Oh, the usual client stuff. Nothing interesting." She used to tell me everything about difficult clients, office drama, funny conversations with coworkers. Now I got nothing. The physical distance started around the same time. We used to be naturally affectionate, holding hands while watching TV, quick kisses when passing in the kitchen, cuddling in bed before sleep. But Melissa began pulling away from casual touches, finding reasons to stay up late on her laptop while I went to bed alone. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she was always too tired, too stressed, too distracted by work. "You're being clingy, Dan," she said one night when I mentioned feeling like we were becoming roommates instead of spouses. "I just need some space to focus on my career right now. This promotion is really important to me." I backed off. I gave her space. I told myself this was just a rough patch, that all marriages go through phases where work takes priority. I threw myself into my own career, picking up extra clients, staying late at the office to give her the breathing room she seemed to need. But then came the criticism. Little comments that felt like paper cuts, small, but they added up. "Don't you think you should update your wardrobe? Some of these shirts are looking pretty dated. Maybe we should cancel our dinner plans with the Johnsons. I don't think you really connect with that crowd anyway. I mentioned to my coworkers that you're an accountant, and they all made jokes about how boring that must be. I didn't know what to say." She started making plans without including me. Girls' trips that were planned and booked before she mentioned them. Dinner parties at our house where she'd handle all the invitations and then casually inform me we were hosting 12 people on Saturday. When I'd suggest activities for us to do together, she'd find reasons why they wouldn't work. Too expensive, too far, too crowded, too boring. The house started feeling different too. Melissa had always taken pride in our home, but she stopped caring about the little details that used to matter to her. Dishes piled up in the sink. Laundry sat unfolded for days. She'd order takeout instead of cooking the meals we used to prepare together. When I picked up the slack, she didn't seem grateful, just entitled, like domestic work was naturally my responsibility now. Max noticed the change, too. Dogs are intuitive about these things. He started following me around the house instead of her, sitting by my feet during dinner instead of begging at her chair. When she did pay attention to him, it felt performative, like she was putting on a show for an invisible audience. The most telling sign was how she talked about our future. Those evening conversations about children, renovations, retirement plans, they just stopped. When I'd bring up anything long-term, she'd change the subject or give non-committal responses. "We'll see. Maybe someday. Let's just focus on now." But I rationalized it all. Marriage takes work, I told myself. People grow and change. Maybe she was just going through something, dealing with stress I didn't understand. Maybe I needed to be more patient, more supportive, more understanding. The financial irregularities were what should have been my wake-up call. Credit card statements with charges I didn't recognize, expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together, purchases from stores she claimed she'd never visited. When I asked about them, she had explanations that sounded reasonable enough. Client dinners, gifts for coworkers, business expenses that would be reimbursed. But the amounts kept growing, and the explanations kept getting more elaborate. I had to buy a new dress for the Henderson account presentation. You know how important first impressions are in client relations. The team went out to celebrate closing the Morrison deal. It was expected that I'd pick up the tab since I was the lead coordinator. Sarah's going through a rough divorce, so I took her shopping to cheer her up. She'll pay me back when she gets her settlement. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Because the alternative, that the woman I'd built my life around was systematically lying to me, was too devastating to contemplate. The final straw in this slow-building avalanche of disrespect came 2 weeks ago. I had taken the afternoon off for a dentist appointment and decided to surprise Melissa with lunch at her office. I'd done this before during our good years, and she'd always been delighted to see me. But when I walked into the Hartwell marketing lobby with a bag from her favorite Thai restaurant, the receptionist looked confused. "Oh, Mr. Keller, Melissa's not in today. Didn't she tell you? She took the day off for a personal appointment." The ground shifted beneath my feet. She'd left that morning in her work clothes, kissed my cheek, told me she had back-to-back meetings and wouldn't be home until late. I stood in that lobby holding pad thai and feeling like an idiot, making excuses to the receptionist about miscommunication and scheduling mix-ups. I drove home in a daze, the untouched food getting cold in the passenger seat. Our house felt different when I walked in, like someone had been there who didn't belong. Nothing was obviously out of place, but something felt wrong. Max was agitated, pacing by the front door and whining in a way he'd never done before. That night, when Melissa came home at 10:30, claiming exhaustion from the most insane day ever, I almost confronted her. The words were right there, ready to spill out, but she looked so tired, so stressed, and I found myself making excuses for her again. Maybe she'd had a client emergency. Maybe she'd been called off site and forgot to mention it. Maybe the receptionist was confused, but deep down, I knew. The marriage I'd been fighting to save was already over. I just didn't want to admit it yet. The moment of absolute clarity came on a Tuesday night in late October. I remember the date exactly, October 24th, because it's the day my old life officially ended and this nightmare began. I'd been working late, trying to finish quarterly reports for 3 different clients before the month-end deadline. The office was empty except for me and the cleaning crew. Around 9:30, I realized I'd left my backup hard drive at home, and I needed the Morrison files that were stored on it. The deadline was tight, and those files represented weeks of work I couldn't afford to recreate. I called Melissa to let her know I was coming home, but her phone went straight to voicemail. No big deal. She'd mentioned having dinner with her sister that evening, and Sarah's apartment was in a dead zone for cell service. I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, mentally organizing the work I still needed to complete. Our house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, which made sense if Melissa wasn't home yet. But as I fumbled for my keys at the front door, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Laughter, male laughter, coming from inside my house. Then Melissa's voice, lighter and more animated than I'd heard it in months. "Oh God, you're terrible. What if someone sees us?" More laughter. The sound of footsteps upstairs. Our bedroom. I stood on my own front porch, key halfway to the lock, as my brain tried to process what I was hearing. Maybe it was the TV. Maybe she'd come home early and was watching a movie. Maybe, "Daniel never touches me like that anymore." Melissa's voice drifted down from the bedroom window, clear as crystal, unmistakable. A man's voice responded, "His loss. You're incredible, baby." The key slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the porch. In that moment, standing in the dark outside the home we'd built together, listening to my wife betray our marriage with casual cruelty, something fundamental broke inside me. Not just my heart, though that was shattered beyond repair, but something deeper. My faith in the basic decency of people. My belief that love meant something. My trust in my own judgment. I picked up the key with shaking hands and let myself into my own house like a thief. Max bounded down the stairs to greet me, tail wagging, oblivious to the devastation unfolding above us. I scratched behind his ears with numb fingers, listening to the sounds from upstairs, sounds that confirmed every fear I'd been pushing down for months. I could have stormed up there, could have kicked down the bedroom door, confronted them in the act, demanded explanations and apologies. But something cold and calculating had taken over my mind. Standing in my living room, surrounded by photos of our life together, listening to my wife mock our marriage to her lover, I realized that emotional reactions would only work against me. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. The audio quality was crystal clear. Every word, every laugh, every intimate sound that proved beyond doubt what was happening in my bedroom. I documented the time, the date, took photos of the unfamiliar car parked discreetly down the street. After 20 minutes of gathering evidence, I quietly left my own house and drove back to the office. I finished the Morrison reports in a focused fury, numbers and calculations providing the only stability in a world that had just revealed itself to be built on lies. That night, lying awake in our guest room while Melissa slept peacefully beside her lover in our bed, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. I wasn't going to be the fool who got blindsided and destroyed by someone else's selfishness and cruelty. I was going to fight back, but I was going to do it smart. The next morning, Melissa came downstairs humming, making coffee like nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek, the same cheek she'd kissed yesterday before lying about her dinner plans, and asked about my late night at the office. "How did the reports go?" "You looked exhausted when you came to bed." I'd actually slept in the guest room, but apparently she'd been too distracted to notice. I played along, watching her performance with new eyes. She was good, I'll give her that. Oscar-worthy, really. The concerned wife, the supportive partner, the woman who definitely hadn't been entertaining another man in our bedroom just hours earlier. "Fine," I said, sipping coffee that tasted like ash. "Just the usual deadline pressure." Over the next week, I began planning my counterattack with the same methodical precision I brought to forensic accounting. This wasn't going to be an emotional meltdown or a messy confrontation. This was going to be systematic, thorough, and absolutely devastating. First, I needed more evidence. The audio recording was damning, but I needed a complete picture of her betrayal. I installed discrete monitoring software on our home network, tracking data usage and connected devices. I hired a private investigator, Marcus Webb, a former police detective who specialized in infidelity cases. Marcus was expensive, but thorough. Within 2 weeks, he documented a pattern of deception that went back 6 months. Melissa was having an affair with Trevor Hutchinson, the creative director at Hartwell Marketing. 35 years old, divorced, drives a red BMW convertible, the same car I'd seen parked down our street that night. They'd been meeting at his apartment, various hotels, and yes, occasionally at our house when they thought I was working late. But the affair was just the beginning. Marcus's investigation revealed something much worse. Melissa and Trevor were planning to destroy me completely. She'd been documenting fake incidents for months, building a false narrative of domestic abuse. Photos of bruises she'd given herself, screenshots of text messages she'd sent to friends describing my increasingly violent behavior, a journal filled with fabricated accounts of arguments that had never happened, threats I'd never made, violence I'd never even imagined. She was building a case to not just leave me, but to frame me as an abuser. The goal wasn't just divorce, it was total destruction. She wanted the house, the savings, Max, and my reputation in ruins. She wanted me jobless, friendless, and possibly in prison. The plan was almost elegant in its cruelty. She would stage a domestic violence incident, call the police, and have me arrested. While I was trapped in the legal system fighting false charges, she'd clean out our joint accounts, file for divorce with her fabricated evidence, and start her new life with Trevor. By the time I proved my innocence, if I ever could, she'd have everything, and I'd have nothing. According to Marcus's surveillance, they were planning to execute this plan within the next 2 weeks, so I decided to beat them to it. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. Melissa had unknowingly provided me with all the tools I needed to destroy her. Her fake documentation, her lies, her systematic deception, it would all become evidence of her fraud instead of my alleged abuse. First, I secured our assets. Working with a lawyer Marcus recommended, Patricia Hoffman, a family law specialist with a reputation for aggressive tactics, I quietly moved half of our joint savings into a separate account. I documented every shared asset, every piece of property, every financial detail of our marriage. When the shit hit the fan, I wanted ironclad proof of what belonged to whom. Next, I set up my own surveillance system. High-definition cameras in strategic locations throughout the house, all recording to cloud storage that Melissa couldn't access or delete. Audio recording devices in the main living areas. If she was planning to stage an incident, I was going to capture every second of it. The waiting was the hardest part. Pretending everything was normal while knowing exactly what she was planning. Kissing her goodnight while she plotted my destruction. Walking Max together through our neighborhood while she texted her lover about how soon they could start their new life together. But I didn't have to wait long. On November 15th, a date I'll never forget, everything came to a head. I came home from work to find Melissa in an agitated state, pacing around the kitchen, Max hiding upstairs. She'd been drinking, which was unusual for her on a weeknight. "We need to talk," she said, and something in her tone set off every alarm bell in my head. "Sure," I said, casually reaching for my phone to start recording. "What's on your mind?" What followed was a performance worthy of Broadway. Melissa launched into a rehearsed speech about how things had changed between us, how she felt unsafe in our marriage, how my anger issues were getting worse. She threw around words like controlling and intimidating, building a narrative I recognized from her fake journal entries. I let her talk, responding calmly, never raising my voice or taking the bait when she tried to provoke an argument. Every word was being recorded. Every false accusation was being documented. Then she escalated. "I can't do this anymore, Daniel. I'm scared of you. Last week when you grabbed my arm..." "I've never grabbed your arm, Melissa." "Yes, you did. And you're getting angry right now, just like..." "I'm not angry. I'm confused. When did I supposedly grab your arm?" She fumbled for details, contradicting herself, growing more agitated as her performance fell apart. This wasn't going according to her script. I was supposed to get defensive, to yell, to give her the reaction she needed to justify her next move. Instead, I remained calm, asked clarifying questions, treated her accusations like the accounting discrepancies they were. Problems to be solved with facts and evidence. That's when she snapped. Melissa grabbed a kitchen knife, not to threaten me, but to cut her own arm. A shallow slice across her forearm that immediately started bleeding. Then she slammed herself against the refrigerator hard enough to leave a bruise, threw herself onto the floor and started screaming. "Help! Someone help me! He's going to kill me!" I stood there in shock, watching my wife mutilate herself to frame me for domestic violence, while my hidden cameras recorded every second of her performance. She was completely committed to the role, sobbing hysterically, yelling for neighbors to call 911, begging for her life from a man who hadn't even moved from where he stood. The police arrived within minutes. Neighbors had indeed called 911 after hearing the screaming. I was handcuffed in my own living room while Melissa gave an Academy Award-worthy performance as the terrified victim. Blood on her arm, bruises on her back, tears streaming down her face as she painted me as a monster who'd finally snapped. "I knew this day would come," she sobbed to the officers. "I've been trying to leave him, but he threatened to kill me if I ever tried. Tonight he lost control. I thought he was going to murder me." I was arrested, charged with domestic assault, and spent the night in county jail. The restraining order was issued the next morning. I was banned from my own home, suspended from work pending investigation, and suddenly the subject of neighborhood gossip and news reports. But unlike the victim Melissa expected me to be, I wasn't defenseless. The next morning, while Melissa was probably celebrating with Trevor in what used to be our bedroom, I was sitting in Patricia Hoffman's office with a flash drive full of evidence that would change everything. "This is extraordinary," Patricia said, reviewing the surveillance footage of Melissa's self-harm performance. "I've seen false domestic violence claims before, but never anything this premeditated and elaborate. We had everything. Video evidence of her cutting herself and throwing herself against the refrigerator. Audio recordings of her admitting the abuse allegations were fabricated. Financial records showing she'd been planning to clean out our accounts. Documentation of her 6-month affair with Trevor. Screenshots of text messages between them discussing their plan to frame me. But the crown jewel was something Marcus had uncovered through his surveillance network. A recording of Melissa bragging to her friend Katie about how perfectly her plan was working. "You should have seen his face when they handcuffed him," she laughed over drinks at their usual wine bar. "He had no idea what hit him. By the time he figures out how to fight this, Trevor and I will be long gone with everything he's worked for. The house, the money, even that stupid dog he loves so much." Katie had been uncomfortable with the conversation. Marcus had approached her afterward, and she'd been horrified to learn the extent of Melissa's deception. She voluntarily provided her own recordings of multiple conversations where Melissa detailed her fraud, admitted to the affair, and celebrated my destruction. Armed with this evidence, Patricia filed an emergency motion to dismiss all charges against me and countersued Melissa for false reporting, defamation, fraud, and malicious prosecution. The family court judge, Rebecca Martinez, was known for her no-nonsense approach to legal proceedings. When she reviewed our evidence package, her reaction was swift and decisive. "This is one of the most egregious cases of legal system abuse I've ever encountered," Judge Martinez stated from the bench. "Ms. Chen has weaponized domestic violence laws to perpetrate fraud, filed false police reports, and attempted to destroy an innocent man's life for financial gain. This court will not tolerate such a gross miscarriage of justice." The protective order was immediately vacated. All domestic violence charges were dismissed with prejudice. I was reinstated at work with full back pay and a formal apology from HR. But that was just the beginning of Melissa's downfall. The divorce proceedings were brutal and swift. With overwhelming evidence of her fraud and infidelity, Melissa lost everything. I kept the house, the savings, our shared assets, and full custody of Max. She was ordered to pay restitution for legal fees, defamation damages, and the costs of my lost wages during the suspension. The criminal charges came next. Melissa was arrested for filing false police reports, insurance fraud, and attempted extortion. The prosecutor, armed with video evidence of her self-harm performance, pursued the case aggressively. She pled guilty to avoid trial and received 2 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. But the legal consequences were just the beginning of her total destruction. The story went viral. Local news picked up the story of the fake domestic violence case, and the security footage of Melissa cutting herself became a cautionary tale shared across social media platforms. Her name became synonymous with false accusations and legal fraud. Hartwell Marketing fired her immediately after the arrest, citing conduct incompatible with company values. Her professional reputation was destroyed. No marketing firm would hire someone whose name was associated with such high-profile deception. The industry gossip network ensured she'd never work in her field again. Trevor, her supposed soulmate and partner in crime, abandoned her the moment the scandal broke. Faced with his own potential legal consequences as an accessory to fraud, he retained his own lawyer and provided testimony against Melissa in exchange for immunity. Their grand romance crumbled under the weight of real-world consequences. Her social circle evaporated overnight. Friends who'd believed her initial victim narrative felt betrayed and manipulated when they learned the truth. Former colleagues who'd offered support during her crisis publicly distanced themselves. Even her family struggled with the revelation that their daughter had orchestrated such an elaborate deception. The financial devastation was complete. Between legal fees, restitution payments, and the inability to find steady employment, Melissa lost everything. She moved into a rundown apartment in the worst part of town, working minimum-wage retail jobs while garnishing orders seized most of her earnings to pay her mounting debts. 6 months later, I sit in my study. Our study, I should say, since Max has claimed the leather chair by the window as his new favorite spot, writing this account of how justice was served. The house feels peaceful again, cleansed of the toxic energy that had poisoned it during those final months of my marriage. Work has been better than ever. The partners at Morrison and Associates were impressed with how I handled the crisis, and my reputation for integrity was actually enhanced by the ordeal. Clients respect someone who can maintain dignity under pressure, who fights back intelligently rather than emotionally. I made senior partner 3 months ago. The house renovations Melissa and I used to plan together are finally happening, but according to my vision alone. I converted her former office into a library, installed a home gym in the basement, and created a master suite that has no memories of her betrayal. Max loves the new dog run I built in the backyard. I've started dating again, carefully, cautiously, but with hope. There's something liberating about knowing exactly what red flags to watch for, about understanding that trust must be earned rather than freely given. The experience made me stronger, smarter, more discerning. But the real victory isn't my success. It's Melissa's complete and total failure. She tried to destroy me using the legal system as her weapon, and instead destroyed herself. Every lie she told became evidence against her. Every false accusation became grounds for restitution. Every moment of her calculated performance became proof of her guilt. I drive past her apartment sometimes, on my way to the good restaurants and shopping centers she can no longer afford. The building is a concrete eyesore in a neighborhood where police sirens are background noise. Her car, when it's running, is the same beat-up Honda she drove in college, a far cry from the luxury vehicles she used to take for granted. She tried to reach out once, about 3 months after her release from prison. A pathetic letter claiming she'd made mistakes and asking for forgiveness, for a chance to explain. I burned it without finishing it. Some betrayals are beyond redemption. The best part is watching her live with the consequences of her choices every single day. She can't escape her reputation, can't outrun the internet documentation of her fraud, can't rebuild relationships with people who know exactly what she's capable of. She created a prison of her own making, and she'll be serving that sentence for the rest of her life. Trevor fared better than Melissa, but not by much. His career survived barely, but his reputation in the industry is permanently tainted. He's known as the man who helped orchestrate a domestic violence hoax, who betrayed his colleague's husband for sex and money. Professional relationships are built on trust, and no one trusts Trevor Hutchinson anymore. As for me, I'm free. Free from a toxic marriage. Free from someone who saw me as nothing more than a financial resource to be exploited and discarded. Free to build a life based on honesty rather than deception, surrounded by people who actually value integrity. The golden retriever curled up at my feet right now is more loyal than the woman I married. Max never lied to me, never plotted against me, never tried to destroy my life for personal gain. He's better company than Melissa ever was, and considerably less expensive to maintain. Sometimes people ask if I feel bad about how completely I destroyed Melissa's life. If I have any regrets about the thoroughness of my revenge, any sympathy for how far she fell. The answer is simple. She earned every bit of suffering she's experiencing. She chose to weaponize domestic violence laws against an innocent man. She chose to lie, manipulate, and scheme. She chose to try to send me to prison for crimes I never committed. Every consequence she's facing is the direct result of her own actions, her own choices, her own cruelty. I didn't destroy Melissa's life. She destroyed it herself, one lie at a time. I just made sure she couldn't take me down with her. Justice isn't always swift, but when it comes, it's absolute. And watching someone who tried to destroy you get everything they deserve, that's not revenge, that's poetry. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, So click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.